In the autumn of 1940, Europe was already burning. Poland had fallen, France had collapsed, Nazi Germany stood triumphant across much of the continent. And in Rome, Benito Mussolini watched with growing frustration, a dictator eager for glory, but increasingly overshadowed by his powerful ally, Adolf Hitler. Mussolini believed Italy was destined to build a new Roman Empire. He believed the Mediterranean should be Mare Nostrum, our sea, and he believed history would remember him as a conqueror. But reality told a different story. Italy's military was poorly equipped, its leadership was divided, its economy strained, and yet Mussolini felt pressure to act, to prove Italy was not merely following Germany, but standing beside it. He needed a victory. He chose Greece, a target chosen in arrogance. Greece was small, mountainous, and poorly industrialized. On paper, it seemed weak, an easy conquest that would expand Italian influence in the Balkans and secure dominance over the Eastern Mediterranean. Italian intelligence underestimated Greek resolve. Italian planners ignored geography. Italian leadership assumed speed would replace preparation. Mussolini reportedly boasted that Greece would fall in weeks. He did not consult Hitler. He did not finalize logistics. He did not prepare his army for winter mountain warfare. War was declared not because Italy was ready, but because Mussolini's pride demanded action. Greece on the edge. Greece, meanwhile, stood alone. Led by Prime Minister Ioannis Metaxas, the country tried desperately to maintain neutrality. Surrounded by Axis influence, Greece balanced carefully, aware that any misstep could invite invasion. On the night of October 28, 1940, that balance ended. At 3 a.m., the Italian ambassador delivered an ultimatum. Italy demanded free passage for its troops and occupation of strategic Greek positions. Metaxas's response was brief and historic. Ohi, no. Within hours, Italian forces crossed the border from Albania. War begins. As Italian troops advanced into Greek territory, Mussolini announced the invasion to the world. He expected rapid success, parades, occupation, celebration. Instead, he had opened the door to one of the most humiliating military campaigns of the early Second World War. The Greco Italian War had begun, and Greece, small, isolated, and underestimated, was about to shock the world. When Italian troops crossed the Greek border in the early hours of October 28, 1940, they did not march into the open plains Mussolini had imagined. They entered mountains. The frontier between Albania and Greece was a jagged wall of rock, forests, and narrow passes. Roads were few. Weather was already turning. Rain-soaked uniforms turned tracks into mud and slowed everything. Men, vehicles, artillery. Italy had planned a quick war. Geography had other plans. An army unprepared. The Italian army advancing from Albania was large on paper, but weak in reality. Many soldiers lacked proper winter clothing. Boots were thin. Weapons were outdated. Artillery was difficult to move through steep terrain. Supply lines stretched dangerously long through primitive roads. Morale was uncertain. Some soldiers believed they were marching into an easy victory. Others sensed that something was wrong, that this campaign had been rushed, improvised, and poorly thought out. Commanders argued over strategy. Intelligence reports underestimated Greek strength. The invasion force advanced without adequate reserves. Yet the order had been given. There would be no turning back. Greece mobilizes. Inside Greece, the response was immediate. Church bells rang across towns and villages. Reservists gathered at train stations. Farmers left their fields. Students, clerks, and laborers reported to duty. The Greek army was smaller and less modern than Italy's, but it was fighting on home ground, and it was united by purpose. Within hours, defensive positions were manned along key mountain passes. Bridges were prepared for demolition. Local guides helped soldiers navigate terrain they had known since childhood. The Greek plan was simple: slow the Italians, bleed them, and hold the mountains. First clashes in the highlands. The initial Italian advance pushed toward Epirus, aiming to break through Greek defenses and capture key towns, but progress was slow. Greek units used the terrain brilliantly. They fought from ridgelines, ambushed columns in narrow valleys, and vanished into forests after firing. Rain and fog limited visibility. Communications broke down. Italian units became separated, unsure of their own positions. In the Pindus Mountains, a crucial Italian thrust threatened to split Greek defenses. Elite Italian Alpine troops advanced deep into rough terrain, only to be cut off, surrounded, and attacked by Greek forces and local volunteers. Mules carried ammunition where trucks could not go. Women from mountain villages carried supplies through snow and rain, becoming an essential lifeline to the front. The Italians were advancing, but at a cost far higher than expected. The weather turns brutal. By early November, winter began to bite. Snow fell across mountain passes, temperatures dropped. Italian soldiers shivered in inadequate clothing, struggling to keep weapons functional in freezing conditions. Greek troops suffered as well, but they had prepared for winter. They were used to hardship, and they believed they were defending their homes. Every Italian delay strengthened Greek resolve. Every stalled advance gave Greece time to reinforce. First signs of failure. Within days, it became clear that the invasion was not unfolding as planned. Italian units failed to break through Greek lines. Casualties mounted. Supply shortages worsened. Commanders sent increasingly desperate reports back to Rome. Mussolini, expecting rapid success, instead received news of stalled advances and mounting losses. The Greek army was not collapsing, it was holding. And as the Italian advance slowed to a crawl in the rain-soaked mountains, a dangerous truth began to emerge. Italy was not winning this war, and Greece was not finished defending itself. By early November 1940, the Italian invasion had lost its momentum. What was meant to be a swift march into Greek territory had slowed into a grinding struggle in the mountains. Italian units were exhausted, undersupplied, and increasingly unsure of their objectives. Command structures faltered. Communications broke down in the rain and snow. And now, Greece was ready to strike back. From defense to offense. Greek commanders understood that holding the line was no longer enough. If Italy were allowed time to regroup, reinforce, and reorganize, the invasion could resume with greater strength. The opportunity lay in acting quickly, while Italian forces were still disoriented. Orders were issued. The Greek army would go on the offensive. It was a bold decision. Greece lacked tanks, modern aircraft, and heavy artillery, but it had something more valuable at that moment: momentum. The counterattack begins. In the rugged terrain of Epirus and the Pindus Mountains, Greek units advanced. They moved through snow-covered passes and narrow valleys, often at night. Soldiers carried rifles, machine guns, and grenades by hand, supported by mules and human chains of supply. Italian positions, thinly held and poorly connected, began to crumble. Greek troops attacked from higher ground, forcing Italians to retreat down exposed slopes. Villages captured earlier by Italy were retaken, sometimes after fierce close-quarters fighting. The psychological impact was enormous. For the first time in the Second World War, an Axis power was being pushed backward on land. As Italian units fell back, the fighting spilled into Albania, where Italy had staged its invasion. Greek forces crossed the border, advancing toward key towns and supply routes. Cities such as Korch fell to Greek troops, sending shockwaves through Rome. Italian defenses were overstretched. Reinforcements arrived slowly. Roads clogged with retreating units, wounded soldiers, and broken equipment. Winter worsened conditions. Snowstorms cut off supplies. Frostbite became as dangerous as enemy fire. Artillery struggled to move. Medical care lagged far behind the front. Yet Greek troops pressed forward. Mussolini's embarrassment. News of the counteroffensive humiliated Mussolini. Instead of celebrating conquest, Italy faced international ridicule. Reports of Greek victories spread across Europe. British radio broadcasts praised Greek courage. Neutral nations took notice. The myth of Italian military strength cracked. Inside Italy, morale suffered. Soldiers wrote letters home describing chaos, hunger, and cold. Officers complained of poor planning and impossible orders. Mussolini dismissed generals, demanded renewed attacks, and insisted victory was still within reach. But reality on the ground told a different story. A nation united in war. In Greece, the counteroffensive ignited national pride. Despite shortages, despite air raids, despite the growing strain on the economy, the population supported the war effort. Women carried supplies to the front. Civilians donated clothing and food. Churches and schools became hospitals. The war was no longer just a military struggle, it was a national cause. By the end of November, Greek forces had advanced deep into Albanian territory. Italian troops dug in, desperate to hold their remaining positions. The invaders had become defenders, and winter was tightening its grip on both armies. The Greco Italian War had entered a new phase, one defined not by ambition, but by endurance. By December 1940, the Greco Italian War had become a struggle against nature itself. The Pindus Mountains, already unforgiving, turned brutal under deep winter. Snow buried roads and passes. Temperatures plunged well below freezing. Winds cut through uniforms and tents. Nights were long, silent, and deadly cold. Yet the fighting did not stop. It intensified. Mountains that devour armies. The Pindus Range was never meant to host a modern war. Narrow mule tracks replaced roads. Artillery had to be hauled piece by piece by men and animals. Trucks froze or slid into ravines. Medical evacuations took days, sometimes weeks. For both sides, frostbite rivaled bullets as a killer. Italian soldiers, poorly equipped for winter, suffered terribly. Inadequate boots and coats led to frozen limbs. Trenches filled with ice. Rations arrived late, if at all. Greek soldiers suffered too, but many came from mountainous regions. They knew how to endure cold, how to move silently through snow, how to survive when supplies ran low. Winter became Greece's ally. Fighting in the snow. Combat in the mountains was close and personal. Battles were fought at ranges of meters, not kilometers. Ambushes were constant. A single ridge could be contested for days. Soldiers clawed into frozen ground to create foxholes. Night attacks became common, using darkness and snowfall as cover. Machine guns froze, rifles jammed, grenades had to be warmed against bodies to function. Despite exhaustion, Greek units continued pressing forward. Italian positions were attacked repeatedly, forcing withdrawals under relentless pressure. Each captured hill mattered. Each pass taken tightened the noose. The cost of holding ground. The Greek advance slowed, not from lack of will, but from sheer physical limits. Supply lines stretched dangerously long. Ammunition and food had to cross snowbound terrain. Wounded soldiers were carried for miles on makeshift stretchers. Hospitals overflowed. Yet morale remained high. Greek soldiers believed they were winning, not just battles, but history itself. Songs were sung at the front. Letters spoke of pride and sacrifice. Even in freezing trenches, a sense of purpose sustained them. For Italy, morale collapsed further. Italian units rotated constantly, unable to hold positions under Greek pressure and winter conditions. Desertions increased. Officers struggled to maintain discipline. Orders from Rome became increasingly disconnected from reality. Mussolini's desperation. In Rome, Mussolini watched his campaign unravel. Winter had turned his invasion into a disaster. The press was censored, casualty figures were hidden, but the truth could not be concealed from Italian soldiers or from Germany. Hitler, increasingly irritated, recognized that Italy's failure in Greece threatened Axis strategy in the Balkans. British forces were arriving in Greece. The region was becoming unstable. Mussolini promised a renewed offensive once winter eased, but winter showed no mercy. War of Endurance. By January 1941, both armies were exhausted. The front lines froze, not into peace, but into stalemate. Attacks continued, but gains were measured in meters. Soldiers survived day to day, focused on staying warm, staying fed, staying alive. The Greco Italian War had transformed. What began as a war of ambition had become a war of endurance. And as snow covered the Pindus Mountains, one truth became undeniable. Italy could not win this war alone. And somewhere beyond the frozen peaks, Germany was watching closely. By early 1941, the front of the Greco-Italian War no longer lay along Greece's borders. It lay inside Albania. What Mussolini had promised as a swift invasion had reversed completely. Greek forces, despite exhaustion and winter conditions, now occupied large stretches of southern Albania. Towns, valleys, and mountain passes became new battlegrounds, places far from Italian expectations, but central to the war's outcome. The conflict had crossed a dangerous threshold. A war fought on foreign soil. For Greek soldiers, entering Albania carried mixed emotions. They were advancing victoriously, yet every step forward extended their supply lines. Roads were poor, villages were sparse, winter still gripped the land. Every loaf of bread, every shell, every bandage had to be carried across mountains already battered by months of combat. Still, the advance continued. Key towns such as Korça, Gjirokastër, and Himare became focal points of fierce fighting. Hills changed hands repeatedly. Stone houses turned into strong points. Churches, schools, and farm buildings became makeshift headquarters or field hospitals. The war no longer felt distant to civilians. Civilians caught between armies. Albania's population paid a heavy price. Villagers were forced to shelter soldiers from both sides. Homes were requisitioned, food stocks vanished. Families fled into forests or mountains to escape fighting. Others remained trapped between artillery fire and occupation. For many Albanians, the war was not about ideology, it was about survival. Greek troops often attempted to maintain discipline and order, but hunger and exhaustion made restraint difficult. Italian air raids and artillery strikes frequently struck civilian areas, spreading fear far beyond the front lines. The battlefield was no longer just where armies met. It was everywhere. Italy's last stand efforts. Italy regrouped desperately. Fresh divisions were rushed into Albania. New commanders promised change. Fortified defensive lines were constructed along ridges and river crossings. Artillery was concentrated where terrain allowed. Italian air power increased, bombing Greek positions and supply routes. Yet poor weather and rugged terrain limited effectiveness. Planes struggled to locate targets hidden in mountains and valleys. Italian soldiers fought harder now, not for conquest, but to avoid total collapse. But the momentum remained Greek. The limits of victory. By February 1941, Greek forces reached the limits of what they could sustain. Manpower was stretched thin, equipment wore out, ammunition stocks dwindled, the winter refused to release its grip. Soldiers were fighting in worn uniforms, many suffering from frostbite, illness, and exhaustion. Commanders faced impossible choices. Advance further and risk overextension, or dig in and hold what had been won. The front stabilized, but victory felt fragile. Greece had achieved the unthinkable, pushing a major European power back across borders, yet now stood exposed, alone, and vulnerable. Germany steps into the shadow. As Italy faltered, Germany's attention sharpened. Hitler could not ignore the Balkans any longer. British troops were landing in Greece. Italian weakness threatened Axis credibility. A prolonged war in Albania endangered Germany's broader plans for Eastern Europe. Diplomatic pressure increased. Military planning began quietly. For Greece, the looming danger was clear. A new enemy, far more powerful, was preparing to enter the war. The Greco Italian conflict was about to become something much larger. A moment before the storm. For a brief moment, Greek soldiers held their ground in Albania, believing they had forced history to bend in their favor. But wars are not decided by courage alone. As snow slowly melted in the valleys, another storm gathered beyond the mountains, one that would soon sweep across the Balkans and change everything. By March 1941, Benito Mussolini's pride was wounded and dangerous. The humiliation of Italy's failed invasion of Greece had become impossible to hide. What was meant to be a swift demonstration of fascist power had turned into a drawn-out struggle, fought in snow and mud, ending with Italian forces pushed back into Albania. The world was watching, and Mussolini could not accept defeat. So he demanded one final gamble. A dictator takes command. Mussolini personally ordered a massive counter-offensive, later known as the Spring Offensive or Operation Primavera. Determined to prove Italian strength, he took direct interest in the plan. Commanders were replaced, units were reshuffled, artillery was concentrated, air power was promised in overwhelming numbers. Mussolini even traveled to the front, setting up headquarters in Albania to personally observe what he believed would be a decisive victory. For Italian soldiers, this was a moment of intense pressure. Failure was no longer just military, it was political. The assault begins. On March 9, 1941, the offensive opened with one of the heaviest artillery bombardments Italy had launched in the war. Greek positions were pounded relentlessly. Hills shook, trenches collapsed, mountain slopes erupted in fire and smoke. For days, shells fell without pause, meant to shatter morale and defenses. Then came the infantry. Wave after wave of Italian troops advanced uphill across exposed ground against well-dug Greek defenders. The terrain offered little cover. Snow and rain turned paths into rivers of mud. Despite the bombardment, Greek lines held. Greek defense under fire. Greek soldiers endured extraordinary conditions. Many had little sleep, food was scarce, ammunition was rationed, yet they knew retreat could mean disaster. Every ridge and hilltop became a line that must not fall. Machine guns reopened fire as Italian troops emerged from smoke. Artillery responded with deadly precision. Officers led from the front. Medical orderlies worked under constant fire, pulling the wounded from open slopes. The fighting was brutal and personal. Italian troops fought bravely, but coordination faltered. Attacks lacked surprise, communications failed, casualties mounted rapidly. Each day ended the same way, with Italian units falling back, leaving the slopes covered in bodies and broken equipment. Mussolini watched defeat. From his command post, Mussolini saw stalemate and slaughter. For nearly 2 weeks, Italy threw men and machines at Greek defenses. Nothing broke the lines. No decisive breakthrough came. The offensive drained Italian reserves and morale alike. On March 26, the assault was finally called off. Operation Primavera had failed. It was not just a military defeat, it was a personal one. The cost of failure. Italian losses were severe. Thousands were killed or wounded, units were exhausted beyond recovery. Confidence in leadership collapsed. Officers privately admitted what had become obvious. Italy could not win this war alone. Greek forces, though victorious, paid a heavy price as well. They were exhausted, undersupplied, and dangerously exposed. Victory had stretched them thin across hostile terrain. Both sides now stood at the edge of collapse. The war's turning point. The failure of the spring offensive marked the end of Italy's hopes in Greece. From this moment on, the war's outcome would be decided elsewhere. Germany, watching closely, concluded that intervention was no longer optional. Plans that were once theoretical became urgent. Armored divisions were prepared, air units repositioned, diplomatic pressure mounted across the Balkans. For Greece, the triumph against Italy would soon be overshadowed by a far greater threat. Calm before catastrophe. As guns fell silent in Albania, soldiers on both sides sensed what was coming. The mountains were quiet again, but not peaceful. Italy had made its last stand and failed. The next chapter of the war would bring a new enemy, a new scale of destruction, and a test Greece had never faced before. While Italian guns fell silent in the mountains of Albania, a far greater storm was already gathering to the north. Adolf Hitler had watched the Greco Italian War with growing frustration. Mussolini's failure threatened German plans in the Balkans, endangered vital oil routes, and risked British influence spreading closer to the Reich's southern flank. What had begun as Italy's war was now becoming Germany's problem. By early 1941, the decision was made. Operation Merida, the German plan. Germany prepared Operation Merida, a full-scale invasion of Greece. Unlike Italy's improvised campaign, this was a modern blitzkrieg operation. Panzer divisions, motorized infantry, and elite mountain troops were assembled in Bulgaria, newly aligned with the Axis. Luftwaffe squadrons moved into forward airfields ready to dominate the skies. Greek intelligence detected the buildup, but Greece was exhausted. Its best troops were still fighting in Albania against Italy. Supplies were stretched thin. The country now faced the strongest army in Europe with little room left to maneuver. Britain enters the equation. Britain, determined to resist Axis expansion, sent troops to Greece in early 1941. Australian, New Zealand, and British forces landed at Greek ports, forming what became known as W Force. Their presence boosted morale but could not change the strategic reality. They were too few, too lightly equipped, and deployed across difficult terrain. Still, the Allies hoped Greece's mountains might once again work in their favor. The attack begins. At dawn on April 6, 1941, German forces struck. The Luftwaffe bombed airfields, communication centers, and cities across northern Greece. Roads filled with refugees as sirens wailed. German artillery and armor surged forward from Bulgaria, smashing into Greek defensive positions. The key target was the Metaxas Line, a chain of forts built to defend against invasion from the north. The Metaxas Line holds, briefly. Greek troops fought with extraordinary determination. In fortified bunkers carved into rock, they resisted German assaults for days. Even when surrounded, some forts refused to surrender, continuing to fight until ammunition ran out. German commanders were impressed and impatient. Rather than batter every position, German units simply went around them. Armored columns advanced through Yugoslavia, which collapsed in days, then turned south into Greece, bypassing the strongest defenses entirely. The Metaxas Line was not defeated, it was rendered irrelevant. Collapse from the north. With German forces now pouring into Greece from multiple directions, the situation unraveled rapidly. Greek armies fighting Italy and Albania suddenly faced encirclement. Roads clogged with retreating troops, carts, civilians, and wounded soldiers. Air attacks shattered columns on mountain passes. Communications broke down. Orders arrived too late or not at all. One Greek army group was cut off and forced to surrender. Others withdrew in chaos, trying desperately to reach the south before German armor closed the trap. A fighting retreat. British and Commonwealth forces attempted to slow the advance. Rearguard actions were fought at mountain passes and bridges. New Zealand and Australian troops clashed with German mountain divisions, buying time for evacuations. Losses were heavy, but discipline held. Athens was now doomed. The capital prepared for the inevitable. The fall of Athens. On April 27, 1941, German troops entered Athens. The Greek government had already fled. Flags were lowered, streets were silent as German soldiers marched through the city. The swastika was raised over the Acropolis, a moment that stunned the world. For Greece, it was the end of organized resistance on the mainland. A nation overrun. Within weeks, the country was divided between German, Italian, and Bulgarian occupation zones. The victory struggle against Italy was forgotten amid the shock of defeat. Greek soldiers who had stood undefeated in the mountains now laid down their weapons, not to Italy, but to Germany. The war had changed completely. The shadow ahead. As British forces evacuated southward and towards Crete, one truth became clear. Greece had not lost because it lacked courage. It had been crushed by overwhelming force. The collapse of the Greek front marked the beginning of a brutal occupation, widespread famine, resistance movements, and years of suffering that would scar the nation deeply. The mountains that once echoed with victory now fell silent under foreign rule. The battle for mainland Greece was over, but the war for Greece itself was only beginning. As German columns advanced relentlessly south, the final task for the Allies was no longer victory, but survival. The evacuation begins. In late April 1941, British, Australian, and New Zealand forces began a desperate evacuation. Ports along the southern coast, Nafplio, Kalamata, Monemvasia, became scenes of chaos and urgency. Under constant threat from the Luftwaffe, soldiers lined the docks, waiting for ships that might never arrive. Equipment was abandoned, vehicles were pushed into the sea. Orders were simple: save the men. German aircraft bombed harbors and roads by day. At night, Royal Navy destroyers slipped in, loading troops under blackout conditions. Many were evacuated successfully, but thousands were left behind. At Kalamata, German troops arrived before evacuation could be completed. Over 7,000 Allied soldiers were captured, beginning years of imprisonment far from home. The last stand on the mainland. Rearguard actions continued even as evacuation proceeded. Commonwealth units fought delaying battles in narrow mountain passes, sacrificing themselves to buy time. Greek civilians watched silently as exhausted foreign soldiers passed through villages. Some offered water, bread, or a place to rest, knowing the price they might later pay. By the end of April, organized Allied resistance on the mainland had ended. The war moved to the islands. A divided Greece. Occupation came swiftly and harshly. Greece was carved into zones of control. Germany occupied strategic areas, including Athens, Thessaloniki, and key transport routes. Italy controlled most of the countryside and islands. Bulgaria annexed parts of northern Greece, beginning a brutal campaign of forced assimilation. The occupiers took what they needed: food, fuel, raw materials, leaving little behind. Hunger as a weapon. By the winter of 1941-1942, Greece faced catastrophe. Blockades, requisitions, and economic collapse triggered a famine that killed thousands, especially in cities. In Athens, bodies lay in the streets. Families burned furniture to keep warm. Children collapsed from hunger in schoolyards. The enemy was no longer only the soldier. It was starvation. Yet even in these darkest months, something began to stir. The first seeds of resistance. At first, resistance was small and cautious. A hidden radio, a leaflet passed hand to hand, a whispered warning to a neighbor before a raid. These acts carried the risk of torture or execution, but they happened anyway. Former soldiers returned to their villages with weapons buried in fields. Students met in secret rooms. Priests hid messages inside prayer books. The mountains once again offered refuge. Guerrillas in the hills. By 1942, organized resistance movements began to form. Groups like EAM, Alas, and EDIS recruited fighters, many armed with little more than old rifles and courage. They sabotaged railways, ambushed patrols, and gathered intelligence for the Allies. The occupiers responded with reprisals, villages burned, hostages executed, but resistance did not fade. It spread. A war within the war. Occupation divided Greek society. Some collaborated to survive, others resisted openly. Many tried simply to endure. Fear and suspicion crept into daily life, even as solidarity grew among those who fought back. The war was no longer just at the front lines. It was in every village, every street, every choice. The road ahead. As 1941 turned into 1942, Greece stood battered but unbroken. Its army had been defeated, its cities occupied, its people starving. And yet, the spirit that had defied Italy in the mountains now prepared for a longer, quieter struggle, one fought in shadows, forests, and the hearts of its people. The fight for Greece had entered a new phase. By 1942, the occupation of Greece had settled into something far more dangerous than open conquest. The front lines were gone, but the war had not ended. It had simply changed its shape. Now the struggle was silent, ruthless, and fought among neighbors. Life under the boot. The occupiers ruled through fear and fragmentation. German authorities controlled major cities, ports, and transport routes. Italian forces spread across rural Greece, often less disciplined but equally demanding. In the north, Bulgarian occupation was brutal, marked by forced deportations, executions, and attempts to erase Greek identity entirely. Curfews were enforced, radios were confiscated. Any sign of resistance, real or imagined, could mean death. Posters appeared on walls announcing hostage executions. 10 Greeks shot for 1 German killed. Entire villages punished for a single act of defiance. The message was clear: obedience or annihilation. Hunger tightens its grip. Even as resistance grew, hunger continued to devastate the population. In cities like Athens and Piraeus, families survived on grass soup, boiled roots, or nothing at all. Black markets thrived, and so did corruption. Those with connections ate. Those without died quietly. Mothers traded wedding rings for bread. Fathers watched children waste away, powerless. Hunger became a weapon and a recruiting tool. Resistance groups promised food, dignity, and purpose. The mountains become a battlefield again. By late 1942, the Greek countryside no longer belonged solely to the occupiers. The mountains, once crossed by retreating armies, now sheltered guerrilla fighters. Bands of men and women, often poorly equipped but fiercely determined, formed the backbone of organized resistance. Railway lines were sabotaged, bridges were blown up, German supply trains derailed in flames. One of the most famous acts came in November 1942, when resistance fighters working with British agents destroyed the Gorgopatamos Bridge, cutting a vital Axis supply route. It was a symbolic victory, proof that the occupiers were not invincible. The Germans answered with terror, reprisals, and collective punishment. For every act of resistance, civilians paid the price. Villages suspected of aiding partisans were surrounded at dawn. Men were lined up, names read aloud, sometimes at random. Shots echoed through the hills. Homes were burned, livestock slaughtered, survivors driven into the cold. These reprisals were meant to crush resistance, but often had the opposite effect. Grief hardened into hatred, fear turned into resolve. A nation divides. As resistance expanded, division spread alongside it. Different resistance groups emerged, with each its own vision for Greece's future. Political ideology, long suppressed, resurfaced under occupation. Some Greeks collaborated openly, joining occupation administrations or security battalions, believing cooperation was the only way to survive or maintain order. Others resisted fiercely, seeing collaborators as traitors. Families were split, old friendships shattered, accusations flew quietly at night. The occupation was no longer just foreign rule, it was Greek against Greek. Women in the shadows of war. Women played a crucial and often overlooked role. They served as couriers, nurses, spies, and fighters. They carried weapons beneath baskets of bread, passed messages through church gatherings, and hid wounded partisans in barns and cellars. Many were arrested, some tortured, others executed. Their courage sustained the resistance when men were hunted relentlessly. The enemy watches closely. The occupiers adopted. German counterinsurgency units grew more aggressive, intelligence networks expanded, infiltrators were planted inside resistance groups. Betrayals became common, sometimes forced, sometimes bought. The War of Shadows grew darker. By 1943, Greece was bleeding, but still fighting. A dangerous future takes shape. Victory no longer seemed impossible, but unity was fragile. As the resistance gained strength, so did internal rivalries. The question of what Greece would become after liberation loomed over every decision. Freedom was no longer the only goal. Power, ideology, and survival were now tangled together. And the longer the occupation lasted, the deeper the wounds grew. By 1944, the world beyond Greece had changed. The Axis powers were retreating on every front, and the sound of distant collapse began to echo even through the occupied valleys and cities of Greece. But liberation would not arrive like a sunrise. It would come slowly, unevenly, and with consequences no one could escape. The occupiers withdraw. As German forces began pulling back from the Balkans, the occupation loosened its grip, not out of mercy, but necessity. Rail lines were sabotaged daily, guerrilla attacks intensified. Allied bombers roared overhead, signaling that the balance of power had shifted. German columns withdrew northward, destroying infrastructure behind them. Bridges collapsed, warehouses burned, fields were mined. The occupiers were leaving, but they ensured Greece would suffer long after they were gone. In October 1944, German troops finally evacuated Athens. There were no victory parades at first, only silence and disbelief. A city steps into the light. When the occupation ended, Athenians poured into the streets. Flags long hidden were raised again. Bells rang across the city. Tears replaced fear. But beneath the joy lay exhaustion. The city was scarred. Buildings were damaged. Families were broken. Cemeteries were full. Many who celebrated had lost children, parents, or siblings. Others returned from mountains and prisons to find their homes empty. Freedom had arrived, but peace had not. Reckoning begins. With liberation came questions no one could avoid. Who had resisted and who had collaborated? Some collaborators fled with retreating forces. Others remained, hoping to blend back into society. Trials began, but justice was uneven and often clouded by politics. Old grudges resurfaced, accusations were whispered, then shouted. The resistance itself fractured. Groups that had once fought side by side against occupiers now faced one another with suspicion. Ideological divisions hardened, sharpened by years of suffering and secrecy. The war against foreign rule had ended. A new conflict was taking shape. The seeds of civil war. The resistance had grown powerful and divided. Questions about governance, power, and Greece's future erupted into confrontation. Armed groups refused to disband. Political tensions turned violent. Streets that had celebrated liberation now echoed with gunfire once again. What followed would become one of the darkest chapters in modern Greek history, a brutal civil war that pitted Greek against Greek, leaving wounds that would last generations. The cost of occupation did not end in 1944, it multiplied. Memory and mourning. Across the countryside, mass graves were uncovered, burned villages stood frozen in time. Survivors told stories that were difficult to hear and impossible to forget. Monuments were erected quietly, names were carved into stone, yet many stories remained untold. Hunger, betrayal, resistance, courage, all blended into a national memory shaped as much by pain as by pride. The long shadow of war. The Greco Italian War had begun with defiance and unity. It ended with exhaustion, division, and unresolved grief. Greece had resisted invasion against overwhelming odds. It had endured occupation, famine, terror, and betrayal. It had fought back, fiercely. But victory came at a terrible cost. Even decades later, echoes of those years lingered in families, politics, and memory. The war did not just change borders or governments, it changed people. Closing reflection. This is the legacy of the Greco-Italian War and its aftermath. Not a simple tale of triumph or defeat, but a human story of resilience, sacrifice, and consequence. A reminder that war does not end when armies withdraw. It ends, if it ever truly does, in the hearts of those who lived through it. And in Greece, the shadow of those years still stretches long across history.